Hey guys, it's Vandy as the Bio Vanguard Deck Professor. If you guys enjoyed, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and sorry. This time we're covering Keter Sanctuary DZ set 6 for Gramgrace. So Gramgrace and Favrenio both got evolutions in this set. In my opinion, Favrenio's evolution was much better than Gramgrace's, but hey, you know, Gramgrace got an evolution, so we gotta show it off in the deck profile. And honestly, this deck is kind of fun to play. It allowed me to use cards that I've never used before because I was specifically saving them for a situation like this. Let's get the start show and see what we got. First today we have our energy generator. It's our ride deck crest. You may have one ride deck crest on your ride deck. Auto ride deck, when you drive, puts card to your crest on for 1 second, energy charge 3. Continues to have 10 energy, auto begin ride phase, energy charge 3, then act once per turn, energy buff 7, draw a card. All around pretty solid. Every single turn you get a free 3 energy, which is very important because our main grade 3 over here with Gramgrace Z costs 3 energy to use his skill, so being able to use that ability every single turn is great. But also you can, if you want second, get an extra 3 energy on top of that, so it allows for a little bit more pressure considering that energy boss 3 ability is only available once the opponent gets to grade 3. And if you ever have extra energy because maybe you chose not to use the energy boss 3 skill that turn, or maybe you didn't need to for whatever reason that may be, you can energy boss 7 to draw a card. All around pretty solid. It's a way to get hand cards, and it's a way to continuously rack up energy without your opponent being able to interfere with it. So obviously we have a ride deck crest being this. Then we have our starter in Starting Magic Star Lily. Grades will boost 5k, show 6k base, auto rope off a second, draw a card, standard starter, no spell to free draw if you go second. You can really run any starter here. I just to make it Star Lily because I like running the canonical ride line to decks, and this is the canonical starter to Gramgrace that already tells you what the rest of the ride line is, and I can already see the comments holding pitchforks at me. But yep, that's what we're going with. So one of Star Lily in the ride deck. Moving on to the triggers, we have our Over Trigger and Light Dragon Deity of Honors, Armor Tinoa. Grades will boost 50k shield, 5k power, Over Trigger in your deck, read it as a trigger, move that card, draw a card, choose one of it gets plus 1 million for the turn. If you drive check, activate its addition effect, would you until the turn you the player can perform also drive checks for the battles your rear guard attack. All around pretty solid because that means your rear guards get drive checks, and in this deck particularly because you're gonna have a lot of rear guards on board at almost all times, being able to get drive checks out is a great benefit. You could run Bonner for more consistent multi-attacking, you could run Spoiler for recycling. You could run the Dark Over Trigger for healing and calling, or you could run the Light Over Trigger for guard murdering. But the reason why I choose to make it Armatino is because I like running the Nation Over Triggers in deck, meaning we're running Armatino in this one, so one of Armatino. I would use the Keter Sanctuary version of Valna, I would, because I would consider that the Keter Sanctuary over. The reason why I don't is because that card is Japanese exclusive, so can't do that. Moving on to our normal triggers, we have a total of 7 crit, 3 copies of Daring Knight Sol, grades will boost 15k shield, 5k power. You're going to make this any crit you want. I just choose to make it this crit because I consider it Gramgrace's official critical trigger since it was in the Gramgrace start deck, so 3 copies of Sol for that reason. Then we have 4 copies of Blade Feather Dragon, grades will boost 15k shield, 4k power. I do recommend you run Blade Feather Dragon because all the rear guard that about this unit boosted, put this unit to Soul to shoot if you want to use it, gets 2k for the turn. Armor pretty solid, it's a free something to Soul and can give someone 2k, which could make the difference overall in terms of number depending on the situation. The reason why Blade Feather is here and why I do recommend is because this deck can run into a soul problem, especially if you're spamming Gramgrace, Febrinel, and also, Painkiller Angel every single turn. So I do definitely recommend running Blade Feather to help mitigate the soul blasters if you're using them every turn. You shouldn't be, but in case you have to, there you go with Blade Feather. So a total of 7 crit for the pressure in terms of drive checking, and then we have 4 Protection Magic Pro B, grades will boost 5k shield, 4k base, continues guard circle. If your opponent's vanguards are great, 3 or greater, this unit gets 5,000 shield, so you know it's a 10k shield, which is nice to have. It's also draw triggers, so it helps increase the hand as well, so it's definitely a way to get more guard power. And this deck will sometimes struggle with hand card management since the new Gramgrace does not get you an extra hand card, and I'll tell you from experience that definitely hurts this deck's aggro power a lot, so increasing the hand is a great thing to have. So 4 copies of Pro B for that reason. And then we run 4 heals and Palpitation Angel, grades will boost 50k shield, 5k power, standard heal, and that's about it. You can run any heal you want. I choose to make a Palpitation Angel because I like the look of her. I really love like her pink wings and how they are kind of it's not translucent, it's kind of like translucent, holographic, there we go, with her holographic wings and her bow and arrow, but also because just like this critical trigger over here, it was in the Gramgrace start deck, therefore I assume this is the canonical heal for Gramgrace, so 4 copies of Palpitation Angel. Then moving on to our grade 1s, we run 3 copies of Painkiller Angel, grade 1 boost 5k shield, 8k base, auto rear guard at the end about this unit boosted, soul boss 1 retire this unit to draw a card. Okay, cool, you soul boss 1, you retire her and you get a free hand card, which is great, so you know you can call her down in the early game to pressure down the opponent. Then when you get to grade 2, you can move this card to the back row, call grade 2 in front of it, and every turn from that point on, you can retire her after she boosts to possibly get an extra hand card to replace her, increase your guard power. Again, the only downside is she could end up costing you soul, which does hurt Gramgrace a lot since you have to soul boss 1 to get the energy boss 3 skill. But again, this is why we have our soul chargers in here in the form of Blade Feather Dragon, and also Gwyn over here just in case if I could find him. Gwyn over here just in case you need them. So 3 copies of Painkiller Angel for the draw card ball, so you can just call down the early game for an early game rush. Another card you could also call down in the early game from early game rush, and you're kind of intended to just in case you can't make a bunch of rear guards towards the late game, is Saragon. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, auto rear guard when this unit boosts anything if you have more rear guards than your opponent, or you played an order this turn. Hint, hint, there are no orders in this deck, so you're always going to have more rear guards than your opponent. This unit gets 5,000 power for that battle, and then at the end of that battle, retire this unit, look at the top 2 cards of your deck, choose one from among them, put it to hand, and put the other at the bottom. All around, pretty solid. You don't have to kill it if you don't want to, because that is a cost, so if you just want to constantly get more rear guards than your opponent and have a constant 13k booster on your board, you can. But again, this ability procs regardless of what grade either player is at. So when you go grade 1 turn, if you're going second and you open up with a bunch of painkillers and Saragons, you can just call a lot of them. You're going to have more rear guards to your opponent because it's the first turn of the game, and I highly doubt they call a bunch of rear guards to try to fight back against Saragon. You early game rush them, you draw from painkiller, you add cards to hand from Saragon. All around, very solid grade 1 to have. And the best part about him is he select it adds to hand. So worst case scenario, you're just picking from 2 triggers to add to your hand. Hopefully that's not the case, but I do admit from sometimes from experience that will end up being the case. But again, you don't have to kill it if you don't want to, like I said earlier, so it's a 13k base, possibly you can always have on board. So it's a very solid 4 for me and a nice card in the early game. Then we have 4 copies of Paladinium Zealdragon, grade 1 boost, 0 subs, K base continuous sentinel, 4 sentinels in deck, I'll spawn on guard circle, choose one of these, I cannot be hit to the battle, and if your hands 2 more cards in it, choose a card from your hands, card standard PG, nothing just about it. Basically means if this only more cards that your hand place on guard circle, you don't have to discard is great, because that means you can be as aggressive as you want in the early game, spam the ever living hell out of these 2, and then when your opponent eventually counterattacks you for having a low amount of hand cards, throw down Paladinium Zealdragon, give them the middle finger, and you're good to go. All around, this PG is very great to have in the deck. You could run Aegismire Dragon or Keflon because they both have the exact same skill as Paladinium Zealdragon, but you should run Paladinium Zealdragon because it came out close to the time of Gramgrace's release, so I like to have it as the PG for this deck, so 4 of. Then we have the last grade 1 in the deck, 1 of in the right deck, no copies in the main deck of Ascension Angel, grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, auto reward upon draw a card, then choose a card from hand, discard it, so you get a free hand card, but you also gotta lose a hand card, which definitely sucks in this deck because the grade 2 of the ride line, well, works really well in Favrenio because they both got the exact same ride line, grade 2 and grade 1. It doesn't work as well in Gramgrace here, especially because you really need Soul here, and she unfortunately takes away from Soul, but this draw and discard can at least help you filter out for more cards. Most of the time for me, it's going to make me draw a trigger, but it can help me possibly draw into Saragon or Painkiller or my rear guard makers or, you know, my pressure units. So I like having this as a 1 of in the ride deck. If you want a good ride line, I'll definitely recommend you use the Blaster Dark ride line where you use Wingull Brave as the starter, you use Marin as the grade 1 so you get a superior call of Wingull Brave, and then you use Blaster Dark so you get Twin Drive. That's my recommendation, but obviously I don't stick to my recommendations. I stick to canonicalness, so 1 of Ascension Angel in the ride deck. Moving on to our grade 2s, 2 copies of something I didn't realize was going to be a Gramgrace support card when I first saw it. I think my initial response was it was just a random Keter support card, and then I tried it out with Gramgrace and had one very specific match where I got it to 3 crit, and then it became a really good card for me, and that is Knight of Ferocity Eldolf. Grade 2, intercept, 5k shield, 8k base, continuous rear guard. During the battle, this unit attacked into anything. When your opponent would call cards from hand to guard circle, they must call the same number of cards this unit's critical at more at a time. So this card is really good for pressure because although it's an 8k base, remember, Gramgrace gives anything an extra crit, and it gives it 10k on top of it, not counting Persona Rides. So essentially, you just stack numbers to this thing, make sure your opponent's intercepts can't stop it, give it an extra crit at least once via Gramgrace skill, and then stack all of your critical triggers onto it. Therefore, when it attacks, for each crit it has, your opponent's going to have to throw down multiple cards, meaning it can possibly throw down a total of 4 cards in one battle. All around, Eldolf is an amazing grade 2 to have, because it can add so much offensive pressure to your opponent. You don't want to see it too much because if you see it early enough, this is just an 8k, which doesn't really help you, that your opponent is obviously going to murder, because when the late game rolls around and you just start stacking crits to it, it obviously will be the thing that kills them. And you also want to see it towards the end of the game, because you're going to most of the time only give Gramgrace's skill to Furbanel and only give the extra criticals part of the skill to Eldolf when you actually need to go for game. So 2 copies of it. You don't want to see it too often, but you want to see it often enough to where you can call it in the end game, which is why we have extra superior calls that we're about to go over right now. First up, with 3 copies of the Dual Nation cards that I've actually never used before, so I put them in this deck because originally when I first played this Gramgrace Z deck and realized that not having the draw skill that old grade Gramgrace had ended up hurting the deck a lot, I decided, you know what, the Dual Nation cards are both superior call, so let's see if that fixes the problem, because I didn't have rear guard options, and now whoop-de-doo, I do have rear guard options, especially because this deck doesn't have really any main soul blast or counter blasters, I mean. So first up, we have 3 copies of Azure, Sky, White Scale, Asperona, and Safria. Grade 2, intercept, 5k shield, 10k base, Dual Nation between Keter, Sanctuary, and Stoicheia. Sarfia. Auto placed on rearguard circle from the hand, specifically not during your battle phase. Look at the top card of your deck and put it to the top or the deck or discard it. And then CB1 perform on the following: either add a normal order from drops in the hand. You will never be doing that because this deck has no normal orders, or you do the other option. Choose a grade 2 or greater from your drop zone, call to rearguard circle. All around, that is a pretty good ability because you get to stack the top card of your deck so you can see if it's a trigger or not, or just put it into drop zone in case you don't already have a bunch of good cards in drop zone because maybe you're only discarding triggers for Riot deck this game, and then you can CB1 to get that card back. But the best part is, because that CB is only a part of the superior call effect, worst case scenario, you call this card down, you check the top card, put it back to top. So all around, Asparnia and Sarfia is really good. It can deck stack you for triggers, but it can also get you rear guards back and can definitely work out with Adolf over here in case you or Adolf over here in case you really need the offensive pressure to bully down your opponent, but you had to guard with it at the end of the last turn because maybe you were going to die if you didn't, and then you top deck into Sarfia, boom, you can superior call it right back. So 3 copies of Esperar and Sarfia, just a very good grade 2 to have in the deck. Then we have 3 copies of Gallant Mechanical Ability Valtrosa and Leo, grade 2 and step 5k shield, 10k base, auto plus on rearguard circle under during the hand during the battle phase, choose up to 1 Normie without Sentinel or up to 1 order card from the drop zone. Again, no order, so it's going to be a Normie without Sentinel. Bot deck it, and then CB1 to check the top 5 and choose up to 1, choose one of the cards, reveal it, and then perform one of the following. If the reveal card's an order card without Regalia's piece, put it to hand, shuffle the deck. Okay, never going to happen, which means we go into the second skill. If the reveal card's grade is less than the Vanguard or equal to it, you can call to rearguard circle and shuffle the deck. All around, pretty solid. It gets you a unit back into your deck, so you're not going to deck out too easily, and you get to check the top 5 to add or call something to rearguard, which is also great for, again, offensive rearguard pressure. Sadly, she can't proc off herself or Sarfia because both of them have to be called specifically from hand, but on the bright side, it does get you a rearguard, so again, it could possibly get you out of Edeloff, or it could get you out of Furbanel for the Vanguard pressure. It gets you out this for soul charging pressure, or this just for overall numbers. And the best part is, just like Sarfia, the CB1 is not applicable to the first part of the skill, meaning if you just want to call this to put back a norm unit because you're going to deck out, if you don't, you can, and then just choose not to CB so you don't have to check the top 5 and force yourself to deck out via superior calling. All around, very great grade 2 to have, get you cards back in deck, get you a rear guard for free, easy 3-0 for me. Then we have 4 copies of Knight of Soaring Spear Granthu, our main way of fixing the soul charging problem, because you're not going to be spamming down Blade Feather Dragon 24/7. Though if you end up seeing a bunch of Blade Feather Dragons off of these 2, then so be it. But auto when placed on rearguard circle, if your Vanguard's a Gramgrace, soul charge 1 and he'll get 5,000 power for the turn. Cool. Very simple. On place rearguard, get an extra soul, get 5k. The other reason these 2 are here as well is because these do not require the Vanguard to be a grade 3. They just do the best when they're a grade 3. To be more exact, this one does its best when they're a grade 3. This one can do its best whenever. But the reason why the reason why those are here is because I would always draw into Granthu, and I never really wanted to call it because my Vanguard was not a Gramgrace, but I really wanted aggressive pressure, so I'd have to call down on grade 2 turn and then not get the soul charge, which at the end of the day might end up screwing me over in case I really needed soul that game. So being able to get you soul and a free 5k is great. The only downside is the soul charge is mandatory, so it could possibly make you deck out, but hey, that's what we have Altrosa over here for. So 4 copies of Granthu, get you free soul, 15k base the turn is placed, possibly 25 if you boosted behind Gramgrace, easy 4 of. Then we have 4 copies of Knight of Soaring Refinement Diff, grade 2 and SF 5k shield, 10k base, auto rearguard when your grade 3 or greater Vanguard, the center column attacks. If your Vanguard's a Gramgrace, the attacking unit gets 5,000 power for the battle. Cool, so the Vanguard will always be an 18k regardless, which is great that the Vanguard does have a little bit of offensive pressure to him, but also in the sense of whatever grade 3 you put behind him, so in case you call another Gramgrace because you really need that offensive pressure, or you just call it Febrinel, it gets an extra 5k on top of that, plus Gramgrace's additional 10k, so that's a 28k swing regardless of which one of those that is, which is pretty great, regardless of what grade the Vanguard's at by the opponent's Vanguard's at, by the way, so being able to be 28k swings against a grade 2 is amazing. And then auto from a rear guard circle, when this unit attacks at anything, if your Vanguard's a Gramgrace and your units in the center column have attacked 2 or more times this turn, regardless of what grades they were, CB1 and this unit gets 15,000 power for the battle, again, regardless of what grade the opponent's Vanguard's at, meaning this unit can swing for a 25k without boost and or triggers against a grade 2 Vanguard. All around, Diff is a very good grade 2 to have. Add numbers to the column add numbers to the center column that's attacking, adds numbers to himself regardless of what grade the opponent's Vanguard's at. It can possibly allow you to beat your opponent before they even get to grade 3. The only downside is that he does eat into the CB, which you are mainly using your CB for the superior calls of Sarfia and Valtrosa. So if you end up running into a CB problem, you could over Gwanathu run Tunar, who is a grade 2 who goes to soul once you have 3 or more face down damage to countercharge one, so she gets you both soul and she gets you both CB. But I feel like you can manage this deck really well with CB as long as you're not spamming all 3 of these 24/7, because Din is mainly here for the extra 5k up here. But again, possible 25k swing on his own without triggers or any other buffs, so 4 copies of him. Just good for making the center columns better in number-wise, but also good for just all-around defensive pressure himself. Then we have our last grade 2 in the deck, one of in the right and none in the main deck, of who, even though I don't like the fact that her skill kind of conflicts with the deck, I do find her very fun to use because you're not always using her skill, meaning every game is going to be a little bit different because there are sometimes situations where you don't want to use her superior riot skill because you're not going to be able to activate the skill of Gramgrace or all your combo cards you want to use that game, which I do sometimes on camera. Like, go check the last Gramgrace game I did. I'm pretty sure I did that during game 2 or game 3, and it's very fun to do that because, again, you're not always going to do that, so there's always some air of unpredictability with the grade 2 turn. And it's grade 2 and step 5 shield, 10k base, continuous Vanguard circle. When you ride from the ride deck, you can ride by soul blasting 1 instead of choosing a card from your hand discarding it. Again, this deck does use up soul for the main grade 3, but also for the combo of Fibronel, so you don't want to use up all your soul, so there are times where you're going to have to just ditch the card for the ride deck instead of using Gatte boss skill to soul blast 1, but there are going to be times where you're going to be able to soul blast 1 and not have to discard a card, meaning you can put more cards on rear guard. All around is a very solid grade 2 to have in the ride deck, so one of in the ride deck for us. Then moving on to grade 3s, we run 4 copies of Knight of Soaring Blade Fibronel. Grade 3 to 9% 13k base, auto back or rear guard center. I think about this unit attacked into anything. If your opponent's Vanguards are grade 3 or greater by soul blasting 1 and ditching 1, choose one of your Vanguards with Gramgrace in the card name. It gets 10,000 power for that turn and +1 drive. So the Vanguard will have triple drive and plus 10k on top of the diff ability, so he'll be at 28k. The thing I like about this the most is that Gramgrace gives the unit behind it plus 10k, so essentially it's shifting the power back to Gramgrace. And if you combine it with Gramgrace's ability to give extra crit, that means you're going to have 2 units swinging that turn with 28k extra crit without end up persona riding. If you do persona ride, that's 38k extra crit with a triple driving Vanguard as well. All around, Fibronel is a very great grade 3 to have. Adds powers to Gramgrace, which is very necessary because Gramgrace doesn't give itself power at all. Gives the Vanguard to drive checks to replace the card you're discarding and itself, and it just works with the and also, not to mention the fact it's also just a grade 3, so it does proc off really well with Diff's ability. So 4 copies of Fibronel. And then our last card in the deck, 3 of in the main deck, 1 in the ride deck of course, our main grade 3, who unfortunately, unlike the new Fibronel, does not have any synergy with its old version because it can't persona ride off of it, but hey, we live with what we got. Sword Saint Knight Dragon Emperor, Gramgrace Zeeg. This thing is straight up a buddy fight card, and it looks so cool with his sheath and his giant sword over here. Grade 3, 25% ride, 13k base, continues Vanguard, your persona rides also increase the power of your backward units as well, so it does keep the OG skill that OG Gramgrace had, where you could persona ride for the entire board, which is great. And act Vanguard once per turn, so boss 1 to choose one of your back row center rear guards. It gets continuous rear guard. This unit can attack from back row, and it gets 10,000 power until end of turn. And then if your opponent's Vanguards are grade 3 or greater, you can energy boss 3 to give both this unit and that unit extra crit for the turn. Cool. Vanguard having double crit pressure, this having double crit pressure regardless once your opponent hits grade 3, so regardless if you persona or not, that's going to be tunes with double crit. And again, these are going to share the 10k between each other. If you persona that turn, again, I say that'll be 33k with 38k double critical for 2 different units, which is amazing for numbers, but also combine that skill with auto loft, that'll make it double critical. So even though it's only double critical, it's at least forcing out 2 cards at a time, and once you see 1 more critical, well, forcing out 3 cards at a time for guard is pretty impressive just for simply only using 3 EB on it and 1 critical in the drive check. And then finally, auto Vanguard, as about your back or rear guard attack, you may put that unit to soul. If you put a card to soul, draw a card at the end of that turn. That ability is incredibly important, because a lot of times in Vanguard and stalling matchups, any single draw can make you lose the game via deck out, especially if you get into the situation where at the end of a battle you have to attack, aka OG Gramgrace, you have to send a unit to soul to draw a card. Now, the thing about Gramgrace Z that makes it great is that small change in text. This skill works almost the exact way as OG Gramgrace. OG Gramgrace exact wording was auto Vanguard at the end of battle, your back or rear guard attack, put that unit to soul and draw a card. This one is at the end of battle, the back or rear guard attack, put it to soul, and then at the end of the turn you draw a card. The reason why that's important, say for example you have exactly 3 cards left in deck. You can swing with the Vanguard for twin drive and you'll go down to 1. Remember, Vanguard you lose by deck out the second you hit 0 cards. So now you can't afford to attack with the back row if you were going to use the OG Gramgrace, because the second you do, you lose by deck out. Well, what you do instead is you can now swing with that back row unit first, because you're not going to deck out from it since you're going to draw at the end of the turn, meaning you don't lose until you end the turn exactly. All around, Gramgrace works for a very good card because you're still getting that hand card, but ultimately it could decide the difference between you winning and losing, especially if you have to attack in a specific way to get rid of your opponent's cards or mess with their PG order because, you know, the 2 or less cards is a thing. But then also in the sense of still gives 10k to your rear guard, still gives something extra critical, and it only costs a soul blast to do it now, not just a CB. The only downside is it doesn't draw when using this skill, but hey, it still does get good numbers and it gets offensive pressure out of it, and it does still keep the persona ability. So Gramgrace Zeeg is a very solid upgrade. You just have to figure out a way to work the deck around it. And without further ado, that's it for this step 1. I hope all of you enjoyed. Honestly, this deck is very fun to play. You know, we've got rear guard colors over here, and I'm really glad I finally got to test out these two after so long. We got a really good offensive pressure unit who, while the 8k looks a little bit misleading, automatically with 1 critical trigger, this thing is deadly when combined with Gramgrace Z. We have amazing line of support cards for Gramgrace specifically to help support the grade 3 aggro Colin, and we have an amazing support card in grade 3s to add numbers to Gramgrace and give it triple drive, and not to mention a very fun early game grade 1 turn that you can make. So without further ado, I'm going to someone here. I hope all of you enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and join us on Twitch. I'll see you all in the next one. Don't forget to set up your Vanguards.